Okay, so something that I'm kind of making more of a point of to do when I make these videos is to clarify a bunch of different terms, primarily, of course, ones that are used in the tech industry and maybe some business terms too. This is the Tech Business Nerd channel, so I will cover business concepts as well eventually. But right now, I'm just kind of on the tech wave. So to get started, one of the things that I want to make more of a point of doing on the tech side of this channel is to clarify some of the terminology that we will use or we do use, for those who are pursuing it and those of us who are already in the tech world. I want to clarify some of the terms that we have to learn when it comes to certifications for the tests, the terms we have to use on a day-to-day basis. If you're more on the technical side, whether it's architecture, engineering slash development and things like that, worrying about things such as durability, redundancy, availability, and things like that are most likely bigger parts of your day versus for me, someone that's in IT operations or really the service management side of IT, then those aren't really as big of a concern because we aren't responsible for that. Even when some of our applications go down, we have to direct everything to the IT team who have to get things back up and running, aka make things available for us again. So all these terms, while you may not have to know them for your actual job, whether you're already in tech or trying to get in, it's still good to know what all these different things mean because this does become a language in itself, just like any other profession you go into. So two terms that I want to try to talk about today are infrastructure and architecture, especially with the rise of solutions architects, which is, I think, a relatively new job, if not a pretty new job title, which it seems like everyone's kind of gunning for if they want to go into the cloud space in particular, right? Whether you're looking at Amazon's platform, Google's platform, Microsoft's platform, IBM's, there's at least one other one, and even other just cloud-driven services. Cloudflare being one that I named a while back, and so many different just solutions that are based completely in the cloud. Netflix is based in the cloud. That's another one. So those are two terms I want to talk about today and try to clear it up because that's something that even myself I was confused about at one point, but now I think I finally have a good grasp on what these things mean. So I want this to be helpful for you. So let's go and dive right in. First, we're going to talk about infrastructure. Infrastructure pertains to the different components that can be used to architect a solution in a tech sense, right? But also in a traditional. For example, a lot of different immigrants and people have always flooded the United States, where I'm from. Canada has had the same experience, and I believe the UK has also had the same experience. When it comes to the West, I would say those are the top three countries that many immigrants from many other countries have flooded for a better life. And one of, if not the number one reason that many migrants tend to do this when they leave their home country or their parents leave and they get born in another country is because their home country lacks the infrastructure for them to be successful and comfortable where they were born and raised, right? But what does that actually mean when people say different countries and islands or whatnot don't have the infrastructure that we have? Basically, what people are saying is that these different countries don't have the individual components that would allow people to be successful and comfortable where they're from. There are many countries that don't have functioning school systems, right? Or at least school systems are up to par. They don't have the same access or advantage of technology in right there in the schools that we may have. I remember seeing something on Instagram some time back where it was somewhere in Africa. I forget exactly where, but it was somewhere in Africa. And this African teacher, this man was trying to teach his students how to use, I believe it was Microsoft Word. It was a it was somewhere in Microsoft Suite, but I'm pretty sure it was Word. And they didn't have computers, they didn't have access to the technology to do it, they didn't have access to the software or anything like that. So he ended up drawing on the chalkboard by hand, coloring it and all, exactly what Microsoft Word looks like and tried to explain to his students what the different buttons and things meant and what they were used for. So there are many countries that are just like that, where they just don't have that. They don't have access to technology. Even if they have access to water, it's very limited. There are plenty of countries, especially in like Latin America, South America, where they have water pumps right there in their backyard or like on the side of their house. So they have a very limited supply. So the way we Americans joke about, for example, hot showers or super long showers, why do girls take so long in the shower versus guys, or why the water's so boiling hot and a snack still gotta cook, that whole thing. We joke about it, but there are a lot of other places where they don't get to do that. They don't get to kind of like joke like that. Like they keep themselves on the clock and that they can't shower, bathe, whatever the case is, for more than maybe a few hours at a time, assuming they have other family in the household. But that's just one example of infrastructure. Again, you have schooling, You have functioning all around the clock water systems, plumbing, bridges, the healthcare systems, like these different components that make up a functioning society. That is what's considered infrastructure. In a tech sense, infrastructure would again be the different components that you can use to, for example, create and run a web application. So that could be the virtual servers you use in Amazon Web Services, AWS. That would be the EC2 instances with the load balancers, the firewalls that you use. If you have confidential information that you want to secure, you will probably use KMS, the key management service for that in AWS, and whatever the Google and Microsoft equivalents of those services are, right? Those are the different things, different pieces that you can play with and arrange when you architect a solution for a customer, depending on what they want and what their budget is. And that influences you when it comes to what should I use to get this job done and what should I not use to get this job done. One way I tried to think about it, and hopefully this makes sense, sometimes I like to take certain concepts and I'll think, what type of question would this answer, right? So for infrastructure, I think a suitable question would be, like, say if you were trying to build a bridge pertaining to infrastructure, a good question would be, would I build this bridge out of metal or would I build it out of wood? You know, like, what are the materials that I would use to build this, right? Because I'm pretty sure if you go in some backwater, you know, kind of like Brisa Terabithia type thing, you can find a wooden bridge that's stable and that works and people are comfortable with it when you're walking across it, or even on a hiking trail, right? That works too. But if you told me that the Golden Gate Bridge all of a sudden turned into nothing but wood and you want me to drive across that, no, I'm not gonna be comfortable with it. That's a big gap. That's a big gap. And no, I wouldn't feel comfortable doing that, right? But I think that's a good question when it comes to infrastructure. Just as an example, basically, what materials would I use to build this? That pertains more to infrastructure. Now, how does that relate to architecture? Architecture, in my opinion, is a step forward. It pertains more to the arrangement of the different components to create a solution, whether again it's a bridge or in tech sense, it's architecture for a web application, or it might be the entire IT layout of another company that you're doing consultation work for, right? This is one of those concepts that gets people tripped up even outside of tech, because a lot of people think that architects, for example, like traditional architects, build houses. They don't build the houses, they design it. Architects use their software and their tools to design the houses to fit the request of the customer, right? The same way solutions slash enterprise architects in tech would create different architects to solve either smaller scale problems for particular products, solutions architects, or to create architectures that would apply to an entire organization, enterprise architects. My mentor, in fact, is actually an enterprise architect. And even at his level, he says, no, I just design everything based on what the customer or the client wants. But I don't build this out. I let the engineers and developers handle that. But I'm responsible for making sure that the initial blueprint, which is basically what it is, you're developing a blueprint. I make sure that the initial blueprint fits what the customer wants and hopefully within budget. And if this comes into any type of conflict with the engineers that have to build this out, that's where you have back and forth. The same way it would with traditional architects. They design the building, of course, come up with the blueprint and what things are supposed to look like. I believe they also take part in what things are supposed to be made out of, since that would have direct influence on money and other things, right? But then when it comes to building the actual house, they may show up at the site. They may be there when the site, like when the project starts, when it comes to building a new house or whatever type of new building, but they will more times than not never be the ones that put hands on to building up, like setting a foundation, putting up weight bearing pillars, you know, getting the roof settled. They most likely would never be responsible for that. They would just be responsible for the initial design, and they would check in and see how the current design of the house fits their blueprints and their plans, and if it matches up to what the customer initially wanted. One way you can kind of try to separate these two, architecture is more business oriented. Infrastructure is both business and, I guess you can say, engineering oriented, because they're the ones that are building out the final product ultimately. So here's how you can think about it. Well, before we go into that, the same way I said infrastructure, one way you can think about it is it answers the question, what would I use to build this? Architecture would answer the question, how should I build this? And what design and what ways should I build this so that it supports what it needs to support? And even if issues arise, it's easy to fix so that over the long period of time, assuming this is a long-term solution, it's ultimately a good product, for a decade, 2 decades, or however long possible, right? That might be more akin to traditional architecture, but still, hopefully you get the point. So here's how I've pictured it in my head at this point. I say you have a 3 level or 3 tier system. I would say architecture falls at the bottom. Hopefully that doesn't rub nobody the wrong way. But I would say architecture falls at the bottom because they interface with the customer the most. And they're the ones that initially take whatever requirements from the customer and create the blueprints, the design of what the final product should be. But then it gets pushed forward to engineers and developers. That's where you have infrastructure, which in my opinion is more of a level 2 thing. They're in the middle because their decisions, whether they find out certain materials aren't good or available, this may go outside of budget. I don't know if they track budgets, but I'm guessing they do. If they find out that they're building a house and the way that the house is designed, it might not be a good idea because I don't know, the house might crumble under its own weight, for example, just making something up. That's something that they will push back on, right? In a tech sense, they may push back on security service in the cloud architecture that may cause issues, technical issues for the customer. So engineers may determine and push back against the architect and say, hey, this may not be the best service to use for this. This will cause some type of issue for the customer down the line. It may not be right away, but it's almost a certainty this will cause issues. So we don't recommend pushing this or using this for this product. And they'll push back against the architect. And now that's where you have a gun now back and forth. That's where you have replanning, redesign. The costs have to be recalculated and a bunch of other things. And that's a process between infrastructure and architects, or architects and developers slash engineers. But that's why I put infrastructure in the middle at level 2, because once they start physically building stuff out and they're the ones that really are like, it's in their face of what this is going to look like, then they're the ones that can stop the whole process and push it back down to the architects, who then have to stay in touch with the customer. And that begins a whole process until they reach a solid middle ground, which they'll build up the product. And now at the 3rd level, you have the finished product or system that we've been working towards for however many months, if not years, right? So that's how I look at it. I look at architecture at the bottom, just to get the foundation and the blueprint and the picture of what this is supposed to look like. Infrastructure in the middle when it comes to actually building it out. But if any issues arise, we push back against architects, or the architecture, and they start that process between the engineers, the architects, and the customer. And when everything's said and done, you have level 3, which is the finished product. Hopefully, this is a solid picture to what solutions architects do, even enterprise architects. Hopefully this could be seen as like a visual job description for solutions architects and enterprise architects. That might actually be pretty cool. But yeah, hopefully this information was helpful to you guys. Hope you guys enjoyed it and it was useful information. If you have any questions for me or just any feedback in general, go and throw it in the comment section down below. I appreciate you guys being here with me again. See you next time.